Thank you so much, Emily, and thank you everybody for joining this afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you're joining us. So the format of the presentation is we'll go through a few slides introducing the data protection landscape and go through some use cases and business cases where our customers are desiring or needing or required to have additional data protection needs on top of Office 365. Then we'll go through a brief demonstration of how Virtru can help protect emails and control content from end to end. And then finally, we'll go through a Q&A session. As you have questions throughout the session, please enter those in, as Emily mentioned, into the GoToWebinar, and we'll be happy to address those as we go through. So I'd like to start off with a use case that you don't hear of very often. It's not very often that you talk about data protection in front of Congress in a positive light. So what you have in front of you here is Dr. Shulkin is testifying in this picture in front of Congress, and Dr. Shulkin is in charge of the Department of Veterans Affairs. For those outside of the United States, the Department of Veterans Affairs is an organization, it's a federal entity that's responsible for veteran care. We have hospitals that are specific, run by the VA, that are responsible for community care and veteran care within this. So in this case, Dr. Shulkin is actually testifying about some various initiatives around increasing or helping improving the care for veterans and how Virtru has specifically helped in exchanging health records. The use case with the VA specifically is handling specifically regulated data under, here in the States, HIPAA regulations for handling healthcare data, but being able to exchange that in an effective manner so that as veterans are seeking care outside of the range of VA hospitals, how can I effectively transmit those records and allow them to both maintain confidentiality, meet regulatory requirements, but also do this in a timely manner. This is a really difficult thing to do in an environment such as the VA because you have to go through various regulatory bodies and various standards to handle this, such that previous to adopting Virtru's technology, the only really effective way that they could do this is via fax machines or via mail, because the electronic transmission of data required additional layers of protection that just simply weren't available within legacy approaches. So we can definitely understand how this impacts the VA as we have a highly regulated environment as we go through this. But if I want to step back to the broader audience around where data protection comes into play, I want to draw your attention to a survey that we conducted over 150 security and IT professionals of various size organizations, organizations of hundreds of thousands of users to to populations of 200 to 500 users. So a broad spectrum of that. And the general consensus was almost 73% of the data assets that were in their environments needed some sort of additional layer of data protection. So this was broken down into, like the VA, highly regulated data, that you have a regulatory body that's dictating that there needs to be additional layers of protection, encryption, maybe end-to-end encryption applied. About a third of that would be just corporate sensitive data. So this would be if I'm a financial services company or a hedge fund worrying about the crown jewels, a manufacturing company that I'm worried about my patented information or my corporate secrets. So the interesting part is around a little less than 30% was just non-sensitive. This is just regular communications and going through that. So through this survey, and as we present this, we see various levels. When I'm dealing with areas like the VA or maybe areas like defense contractors that we're dealing with, that regulated area goes way higher, or the corporate sensitive data goes higher. But there are the needs for data protection as they come across this. And as we look at this, there's multiple things that are driving this needs and will drive the different solutions that are required for this. So first and foremost, something that we're all familiar with as IT professionals is the amount of data that we are creating is just drastically increasing every year. The amount of data that we store, the amount of data that's available to us, whether it's from our customers, whether it's from our employees, this is all critical information that's driving the need to view how are we protecting this? Who has access to this content? Regulation is also increasing the requirements for this. So we talk about familiar regulations around healthcare data, around credit data, around PCI compliance, but anybody handling data for European citizens are also strictly regulated by the upcoming GDPR requirements that the European Union has passed that are coming into effect in a few months now. And as we think about the environments that we have and the environments as we're moving to cloud, IP protection becomes of very important. So those manufacturing companies, those financial services companies that are having high profile data breaches and leakage, this is becomes our forces driving for that. But I'd say the fourth and final area, really the thing that is driving most of my conversations today is around cloud migrations. So as we start moving to platforms like Office 365, we now need to start thinking about how do we now protect this information that has historically been protected by our firewalls, been protected by our on-premise servers, by our access controls and administrative rights in Exchange, or within our file shares. Well, all of these systems are now outside of our firewalls, are going through that. So the data silos no longer exist. And now as we migrate to the cloud, this is driving 4 additional data protection requirements. And really, these use cases can be broken across all of the departments within our organizations. So as we're thinking about this, typically a conversation will start in a highly regulated space. So I'm thinking of my human resources department that's protecting my employee and tax information, or that healthcare information, or those onboarding forms. Here in the States, we're now thinking about the transmittal of our tax records and our W-2 forms coming in, updates to W-4s. Those are things that naturally start thinking from a human resources standpoint, or a finance or a legal, but this also goes above and beyond. So as we're thinking about organizations that have sales departments and sending quotes out, our legal teams worried about protection of IP and going through that. R&D worried about the handling of our most sensitive secrets that were happening. Really, these areas, as we think about data protection, as we're thinking about data protection within Office 365, the consideration needs to be much more than just the silos that we're used to protecting, but how can we provide a consistent platform that goes across our entire environment? So as we think about the approaches to data protection, we want to think about what is available to us previously. What are the legacy approaches for this? So typically these are very siloed focused. So we're used to having on-premise servers and meeting the data protection needs with on-premise infrastructure, with firewalls and servers within our environments. But as quoted here in the Gartner quote, in this Gartner study, really as we think about next generation platforms and as we're moving into cloud environments, you also need to have a significant different approach that needs to be thought of around for data protection from the architecture standpoint. So a few things around existing options that are available. Number one, they prove mainly ineffective. So there's no more perimeter in my environment that we have. Now we are starting to think about both data being in cloud environments, but also being shared vastly around that. As we think about the legacy approach as well, typically they're very hard to use, especially when we start thinking about encryption technologies. Anytime we think of the word encryption, that becomes almost a 4-letter word internally. If I'm thinking about my legal department encrypting communications to and from partner organizations or law firms, that just really, with legacy approach, really isn't feasible to think of. And even with all of these approaches, with server encryption, with controls that you really do lose control with these legacy technologies once they've left your perimeter and going through that. So at Virtru, we want to try to extend the data protection and be that next generation for allowing you to control and protect your data as you move or as you work in that Office 360 environment. And really, we want to focus our technology, and we focus our technology on three major areas. The first one is naturally data protection. We want to provide a mechanism for you as IT and security professionals to protect the content when it's created, so that it is only accessible to authorized parties when they are authorized. So not automatically as you upload data to your cloud environment. That doesn't mean that that cloud provider needs to be an authorized party. We also want to allow you to easily share this. So not creating artificial boundaries. Are you on my network? Are you in my system? Do you have accounts? You have to create those. We don't want to create an artificial boundary that allows you to, forces your staff and your workforce to work in a different manner. And then from a security standpoint, we want to always ensure that you have control, and if there's any data that has left your environment that you want to pull back, always give you the ability to revoke access to those. But control also focuses on encryption keys and ensuring that you have full control who even has access to those keys. And so we do this by providing a versatile key management approach that allows you to use software as a service, allows you to host your own key servers and going through that environment. So why customers choose Virtru is really, we will provide that protection, that sharing and control capabilities, but we do this in a surprisingly easy to use manner. We want to make this very seamless from the user, because if you're not providing easy to use technology, then your customers will try to bypass using this technology. We'll go through that. So as we're thinking about the Veterans Affairs Administration, we need to ensure that it's very easy to send those communications so the patients can get a very easy to use and an effective and efficient manner to communicate. We want to ensure that this information is secure from the creation all the way to the consumer, so we will apply and use end-to-end encryption when at all possible. So allowing you to hook directly into, in the context of email, into your Outlook or your Outlook web experience for Office 365, allowing you to control access to those keys and providing around that. And also, when you protect content with Virtru, providing that visibility and control of that data element, auditing who has access to that content, being able to provide control on when content is secured and providing that. So practically what this looks like in the Office 365 environment is providing end-to-end control that also includes some data loss prevention technology that allows you to directly integrate within your Outlook and your Office 365 web experience to allow you to provide end-to-end encryption. And when you use this protection technology, we provide the ability to host your own encryption keys, allowing you to manage who has access to those keys and going through that in a seamless manner from the sender and the recipient. When you apply this, you have that control capability to revoke, expire, provide content downloading protection through watermarking, as well as through that. And the important thing to think of as you're thinking about this data protection technology is you're not introducing a new cloud provider that has access to content. At no time does Virtru, Microsoft, or any external provider have access to this content. You are authorizing those providers to have access to that. So I've set the stage around the areas around the data that needs to be protected, whether it's be regulated or going through that, how this applies to the Microsoft environment, specifically to Office 365. Rather than continuing to go through slideware here, I think the best way to understand how Virtru works and the capabilities that we provide is to go through a brief demonstration of this environment. As I mentioned, anytime that questions come up, please pop those in the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to answer those after the demonstration period. So as we look at the Virtru data protection solution, I'm going to actually start with some of those control capabilities that we have. So when you create create Virtru encrypted content, you're going to do those directly inside of that Outlook environment. We're going to focus heavily on email today, so we'll go through that. So in the context of email, what we're looking at in the Virtru platform that we're logged into a dashboard right now as an administrator is you have the ability to see content that has been protected with Virtru. So I have an email here created by one of my colleagues, Charles. Charles sent those emails to a few different email addresses, and these are outside of these are outside of our Office 365 environment. We have some G Suite environment servers here. I just happen to know these environments, but you have a full audit trail of who has access to this content, when they've accessed it, how they've accessed it there. But most importantly, you have a control mechanism that allows you to at any time revoke access to these emails or this content. This will pull back access to those encryption keys that we have there. This can be applied to the whole thread or individual aspects of this email. You also have the ability to introduce, after these emails have been sent, the ability to disable forwarding or adding expirations or setting those content controls as we have that. Additionally, as administrators, you have the ability to define when this technology is used. So you have the ability through rules to define when people should be using additional layers of protection. So if I find common patterns of data like social security numbers or credit cards, when I see specific keywords used like confidential if I'm handling that, or I see proprietary for that, all of those can be handled, but these can also be targeted to specific use cases. So here I have some specific rules as they apply to pre-built rules. I can choose different actions that are taken, or I can scope these rules based off of who the email sender is or what groups they're in, or maybe aspects of the content that we have. So all of these rules are administrative controls or administrative capabilities that I have the ability to enforce or handle in Virtru clients. So at the end of the day, your users will be interacting with Virtru through one of our clients, whether they be a browser extension that allows us to hook directly into the OWA experience for Office 365, allowing you to toggle Virtru protection on, or whether you're in Outlook where you have the ability to have add-ins that allow you to set up specific controls or additional layers of protection in here. So what the Virtru add-ins or browser plugins or clients provide is the ability for you to provide end-to-end encryption ability on emails and attachments as we have that. So you can do this either selectively by enabling the Virtru protection, by turning the Virtru switch on and then setting one of those policy settings, or by those rules that we described before, identifying by those data loss prevention rules that sensitive data has been found, this is outside of corporate policy, this will automatically be encrypted, or in this case, I've warned the users that this message should be sent securely, which will then send that email and that attachment. So I just sent that email to two different parties. If I go to my sent items here, I can go see that specific email that we had. Let's pull that over, it'll go decrypt. But what was actually sent there? That was a very easy to use thing that was there. If I go look at the original source of that message, what's actually being stored on Office 365, what was being sent to those two recipients was actual ciphertext that needs access to those encryption keys to be able to decrypt. The end user really doesn't know all of these details, but IT administrators, as security professionals, you need to know what's happening here is we've sent an encrypted email to two particular parties that are authorized to decrypt this message or gain access to those keys. So they must be able to gain access to those keys. And I've sent this to two parties, one that happens to be on a G Suite domain that has Virtru installed on that, so another client, but also a recipient that does not have Virtru installed. So we can see even those parties are able to apply and use this technology without having to install any additional software. So let's first focus on that I'm a secure user. So this is outside of my Office 365 domain. They receive that confidential patient information. They're completely out. I was on Office 365 before. Now I'm on a Gmail, a corporate Gmail account, so a G Suite account. So, but they have the Virtru extension for Chrome installed, and that allows us to provide the ability to decrypt those messages directly in line. And even handle those attachments, download and decrypt those attachments directly within that G Suite environment, and then even reply to those messages directly here, and then provide a Virtru protected message back. So all of those are abilities when you have a Virtru client installed, very seamless for your internal users or your external recipients that have our technology installed directly with that. But that is not a hard and fast requirement to access the secure content. We want to be able to share protected communications with any party, whether they have our technology installed or not. And so that is the second user, that new to Virtru, just at a regular Gmail account that we have installed that I have here. So we'll go access this message as that recipient here. So when I do not have Virtru installed, I will receive a customizable introduction message for this email. So you can see this is a very plain template. I'll show you another example of this template here. This template here has some HTML customization as we have this, but for you as an organization, this is a really important user experience, and this is something that can be completely customized from the color scheme, the logos, the buttons, the language. All of that is very important for you to be able to customize. So as we go through that, what we're going to ask the user to do is to go unlock that message. Because remember, we just sent that customer or that outside party an encrypted message that they need to be able to access that encryption key to go decrypt this message. And since they haven't installed any of our technology and we're not going to require that, what we'll do for those users is we will allow them to authenticate themselves. So they're on, this user is on Gmail, so they can log in with their existing Google credentials within that. If they were on, this was an Office 365, they can use their existing Office 365. So all of these are using security mechanisms, so federated identities of OAuth, SAML, or OpenID to authenticate those users. Those aren't always going to be available to us. So if we're also sending to on-prem Exchange, or we're sending to a system on folks on a legacy system, you may use this send me an email approach that allows them to still authenticate those users without having that. What that will do is that will send an email back to them, and that will help them verify their identity. You'll notice I'm logged into Chrome right now. So it says, hey, you clicked on this link in Chrome. We created this one-time verification link that's been linked to this browser, and that will allow them to authenticate this user here. So that's a really important step as an external recipient, is being able to authenticate, because we need to know if they're authorized to decrypt these messages. That authorization step is only authorized parties are able to decrypt these messages. So we can go see the attached form. They can go view this form directly within the environment as we have, and go view the medical form in this case. All of those are capabilities that are offered in the secure reader, and they can even send an end-to-end encrypted message back by sending a secure message back here without having to install any software as we have that, including attachments as we have that as well. All of those are very important capabilities as we have that. So the protection, both from the ability as an administrator to set up rules on when this data is being applied, but you also have the ability as the sender or as the administrator to have a true undo button within this. So that control is above and beyond just those rules. But if I go back to this message, you'll notice here in the Virtru ribbon, is if I accidentally sent this or included the wrong form, or the autocomplete in the send included the wrong recipient, I have the ability to revoke access to that message. And this is that true undo button that we all wish we've had it when we've sent our emails from Outlook and we've chosen to recall those messages, and there's really no possible way to truly recall that. This is that true recall button, this true revoke button that says these parties are no longer authorized to decrypt these messages. So if they were to have this open or go back to this message, access has truly been revoked from this message, making it no longer accessible to those parties. So this is that true undo button that we have there. So we have both the audit trail to understand, has this email been accessed? Has this been accessed within the environment? We also have that if we go to our sent items here. We haven't focused a lot on our the emails that we had here, but let's go look at this same message within the OWA environment that we've got installed as well. We can go see different pieces there, the health form that we have that we've sent within the virtue protection. So that was the message that we started to create before, but we also have things like read receipts that are available within here. You have that revoke button that we looked at before, but you can, even after the fact, turn on some of those features, such as setting automatic expiration dates or disabling the ability to forward. So this is a way to control, even after the fact, access to that content and those encryption keys that we have. So at the end of the day, when you're thinking about additional needs of protection, first and foremost, you're thinking about why. Why would you need additional layers of protection? And we want to think about all of the use cases across our different departments, whether they're highly regulated, handling corporate sensitive information, and we want to create a very easy to use manner that allows them to complement the way that we're working here by working in the environments that we have. And then finally, we want to always ensure that we have control and audit capabilities within the software here. So those are the key focuses that make Virtru different, and as we go through there. And what I want to do now is open it up for specific questions that you've been asking in the Q&A. So as we go through here, feel free to drop any more questions and answers as we have, and Emily will go help us go through those now.
Thanks. So we do have a few questions rolling in. First one is, how does Virtru compare to products like Proofpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. So products like Proofpoint allow you to protect content at the server level, at a gateway level that we have. So the biggest differentiator here is the end-to-end encryption capabilities. So the ability to hook directly within the Outlook clients, the Office 365 web environment, and allow you to protect it before it ever hits the email servers. So that's going to be the biggest differentiator, is being able to protect that there. The second is, when you're protecting it in that environment, you're also providing the ability to provide data loss prevention, the enforcements of policies and procedures directly in user interfaces that the customer can react to, so that as you introduce new policies and procedures around handling GDPR data or your regulated data within your environment, allow you to enforce those controls directly in there. So those are the two primary differences as we have there. As we're speaking about different layers of protection, we would apply those directly in the client. And then the final piece that we would have would be the full audit and tracking capabilities directly within the platform of the access. So Proofpoint provides fantastic technology around threat and access protection and going through that. They provide fantastic direction around scanning and quarantining emails here. Our biggest differentiator is we're really laser focused on that data protection and enforcing that in a very easy to use manner.
Great, thank you. The next question, where are keys hosted?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really there's going to be two options that are available to you. So first, Virtru provides a software as a service where we are fully both responsible for hosting and backing those keys up for you and going through that whole process those will be all hosted in Amazon's infrastructure in the United States and the East Coast and the West Coast data centers today. So that is our software as a service for customers that are in highly regulated industries or need additional layer of protection on those encryption keys. Customers have the ability to host their own key servers as well that ensure all those encryption keys will be protected and go through your customer key servers that you host in an environment of your choice, and that will ensure that Virtru will never actually see those encryption keys, but will handle all of that same ease of use, all of that same seamlessness from a client experience, but allowing you additional layers of controls on those keys.
Great, thank you. Next question, does Virtru work on mobile?
Virtru does work on mobile. So there's going to be two different answers to that question. So for customers that are deploying our solution, one of the most common things that we'll go through together with the deployment is also deploying Virtru apps for Android and iOS. So we build purpose-built apps for iOS and Android that can be deployed via mobile device management, or your users can download directly from the Play Store or from the App Store for Apple. So those are direct experiences that can be deployed and integrate with your Office 365 or your Exchange environments to send and receive encrypted messages. We also, for those recipients that do not have Virtru installed, all of those same experiences that we walk through together in decrypting messages through a browser like Safari or Chrome or your default browser on your device will also are optimized and will work on those mobile devices.
Okay. Next question is, can an administrator revoke messages on behalf of users?
Yeah, that's a great question, because one of the things when you're thinking about end-to-end encryption is whose keys are those? So as we create encrypted content with Virtru, you have individual message keys that are associated with every single message. This is going to be different for folks who have deployed a PKI-based solution like an S/MIME or a PGP. In this case, we have individual encryption keys for every single message and attachment, and those keys are owned by you as an organization. So the VA, the thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of encryption keys that are associated with the emails that they send are all owned by the VA. Therefore, the administrators have the ability to revoke access to individual keys to the different parties, the recipients. They also have the ability to decrypt content on behalf of the organization if they've been given or authorized to do so in a segregation of duty environment. So those keys, and specific to the question, they can revoke access to individual keys or individuals to access those keys when appropriate.
Okay, great, thank you. Now I don't see any more questions in the box. I'm just going to give everyone another minute. If you have questions, definitely let us know. In the meantime, we're just going to launch a quick poll. It'd be interesting for us to know how useful this presentation was for you and your organization today. I'll just leave this up for a moment. All right, I'm just going to close this out. And let me just share this results with you. It looks like this was a relevant talk, so that's great. Thank you so much for taking a moment to fill that out. And I'm just going to head back to here's some more questions. Let me see. What if someone forwards my email to someone else? Will they see that my content even if they weren't on the original message?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so there's a few different behaviors that you can enforce. So one of the capabilities that we offer is when you've sent that message or when you're sending that message to disable forwarding. And really what that means is even if they forward the ciphertext, the original message, that those forwarded recipients wouldn't be granted access to those encryption keys. So they would no longer be an authorized party, or they would never be an authorized party, so they would never be able to decrypt that content. So that original email message. Another case is, so that would be the case where you would not want a recipient to allow other people to see those messages. But the counter to that is if you haven't enabled that feature, working in some double negatives here. So in this case, if you send a regular encrypted communication and that individual forwards it on to another recipient, they have then authorized those recipients to decrypt those messages. And then that would allow those recipients also to have that. So for instance, if the VA was to send a patient record onto one of their community care providers, and then that was then forwarded on to one of the specific doctors, that doctor should absolutely be able to access those records, so they would be able to access that encrypted content.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that's all of our questions today. So we will wrap up a bit early and give you some minutes back in your day. Just want to say thank you so much to all of you for coming and spending your time with us today. And we've got a link here if you'd like a closer look and to learn more about how Virtue can help your organization. Definitely let us know. We'll reach out. And thanks, Brett, for your time and the great presentation.
Thank you all so much.
Yep. Have a great day, guys.